Hey guys, welcome to my channel, Decorate the Soul. I'm Jen, and today we are going to talk about books by Black authors I should have read in school but didn't. So I think, it's Black History Month, and with the George Floyd murder in May, Black Lives Matter is not new, but for some reason it finally woke us up. And I don't know if that's because of the pandemic and we didn't really have anything else to focus on and we could just pretend to be too busy to participate, really, which is exactly what was happening. But because of it, I think the cool part is that normally in February I do make a very conscious effort to include more Black authors into what I'm reading. However, I think that I've been reviewing more materials throughout the year because I've been more conscious of the fact that I'm not doing it. And I don't know, it's tiny progress steps that we make. And I think one of the major things that I realized while creating this list is how racist I kind of am. And it's not like racist in the terms of like I hate Black people or something, but just kind of me going, oh yeah, that's like a female experience. And while parts of it could be a female experience, it's like way more part of the Black female experience. And as a white woman, I'll never experience the depths of that. I just can't touch it. Reviewing this list really kind of reminded me of my privilege, reminded me that I have to keep doing work to keep it in check, and to be aware that things aren't always one or the other. Things can be different levels of complicated, but I have to be aware that someone's level of complicated is always going to be worse than my level of complicated because I'm a white woman. Like, period, end of sentence. When I read these books, they really did speak to me at the time of the Black struggle. But for me, during all of this, I think introspection and I think re-educating myself to be more anti-racist, I think I've definitely become more hyper aware of the Black female experience and what that means, and how I've just left it out. It's just not been something that I've been aware of. I think I'm always like aware of the Black male experience. I think it's just more pushed, and I've definitely kind of let the ladies go, and I think that that's something that I am working towards. I'm not great at it yet, but I think the thing that I can cling to as progress is my awareness of it in the moment when I'm having a thought or when I'm questioning something, or just being aware of like a Black woman's success is something to applaud, but also understanding how much more applause she should get for it because how much further she had to get there versus another woman, like a white woman. I hope that made sense. I'm still working on it myself. I think that I tend to not want to speak on it too much because I don't feel educated enough. And I also think I'm a white woman, like you shouldn't be coming to me for that information. It should be coming from a Black woman or I don't really understand why we keep looking to like white like influencers to kind of lead the charge in that way when they're not the ones to tell. I mean, they could be like, hey, direct yourselves this way, or this is my experience learning. But like, I can only learn it if I'm getting it directly from the source. Because otherwise it's secondhand and it's being repackaged in a way that's more appetizing for whites, is what I'm trying to say. But anyway, these are books that I think, I was an English major and I was extensively taught about, Jane Austen and British authors, and even, and female authors were still, few and far to come between. It was always male authors, sprinkled maybe with a Black author, but there's only one Black female author on this list that I was actually taught in high school, where I was also in all of the honors, AP English classes, so there really is no excuse, and also in college. And I think the reasons why these should be taught, I will talk about. I want to say really quickly that a lot of these books are hyper trigger warning for rape, assault, abuse, all those things, but I feel really strongly that we shouldn't always shy away from those things. Yes, those things are awful. Yes, those things are triggering, but if we don't take the time to sit down and understand and like kind of live through it in this way, we're never going to be able to understand what people go through. We're never going to understand the trauma that we've kind of allowed for centuries to seep in. So yes, it can be very difficult, but I also think it's really important to struggle through and really important to sit down for just a moment and read the fictionalized version to just kind of try to understand and at the very least gain some empathy. So the first book on my list is Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. This is a story of Janie Crawford in her life, raised by her grandmother Nanny, who was a slave. Nanny aspires for a better life for Janie, and that version is a lot different from what Janie wants. Janie dreams of a life of love and a true partnership through marriage. This is what she believes, this is what she wants, and Nanny kind of sees it in the opposite way because of the life she lived. And not even lived, the life that she's kind of forced into because she's a slave. Throughout the course of Janie's life, she meets multiple men and different personalities and kind of maybe stereotypes of relationships and what those mean in pursuit of her dream, all while she still holds out hope to reach that ultimate partnership. The majority of this novel deals with gender roles and how they play into a marriage and where a woman belongs, and even more so where a black woman belongs in partnership with a black male who's trying to kind of make it himself in a racist society. And racism also plays a huge role into this book because Janie is biracial, and so because of that history, she's lighter skinned than those in her community. So there is aspects of colorism that play a role in how Janie walks through life and who she encounters and who kind of sticks up for her or throws her under the bus and all those different types of things. So colorism is something that I can't really understand as a white person. I know that it exists, but this book is a really good lens through how that affects the black community. And I think too that because of colorism, it's something that should be talked about in classrooms. It should be a part of history, but because of it, I don't know, it's something that I knew about and I was aware of, I think, very, very slightly. I'd see it in social media posts, people making jokes and stuff about light skin and dark skin, but it wasn't until this book that I was really like, whoa, I get the history of it and what the motivation for colorism comes from, which is really just to survive in a white-dominated society. The next recommendation is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. I'm sure you've heard of Toni Morrison. If you haven't, what the f***? I chose The Bluest Eye instead of Beloved or some other books by her because what racism actually does if you internalize it, when the racism is directed at you. So it tells the story of Pecola Breedlove, who, she doesn't come from a great family life. Her parents don't really love her. There's a lot of conflicting things in that way. And it's told through the lens of her foster sister, Claudia, who does have love, who does feel acceptance. And in opposition to Pecola, she's actually a foil for her. Claudia hates whiteness. She wants to destroy every time she sees it. She hates white people. She sees what that whiteness does to the black community, whereas Pecola just wants blue eyes. She thinks that if she's pretty, because everybody in the community is telling her how ugly she is and how different she is, and she just can't escape it. She's the lowest of the low within the black community because of how she looks. So she believes that if she has blue eyes, she'll be pretty, she'll be accepted, she'll be able to have the life that she wants. And she desires white European features because of that. Something that she can never have. So through that, because she can't ever have it, Pecola just hates herself, essentially. She doesn't, I think the whole point is that she's not aware that she hates herself because of whiteness and because of the dominating white culture, but because of it, her life is nothing like Claudia's. Claudia is able to more accept herself and see what's happening, where Pecola's life kind of spirals in this way that's just devastating. And I think the importance of this novel is reminding us, one, that beauty is skin deep, but if we keep pushing this idea of what beauty means, we are harming those who don't have those features, that color, whatever it is, in such a devastating way. I don't know if I have the right words for it, but read the book. It's probably one of the easier ones to read of Toni Morrison. Beloved is very difficult to read. Beautiful, amazing, but definitely difficult. I cried while reading Beloved, and I cried while reading this one too, but I think I was able to stay in it more, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I just read it. Okay, so technically I was assigned this book in college. It's called Passing by Nella Larson. And I just feel like it's like not out in the canon as much, and I think that that's why, like, it was kind of like obscurely taught to me in, I think, a women's literature course. I can't even remember now. It was like over 10 years ago, to be fair. It was the first time that I encountered the concept of passing in the Black community, especially in the 1920s, which is when this is, you know, published in like 1929. There was this like huge fear in the white community of all these Blacks migrating north and those whose blood had been mixed with slave owners, and if they were able to pass as white people, what that would mean and how they would like infiltrate society. Like, this is a real thing 100 years ago. This is like a real cause of anxiety and concern and suspicion, which is just something so unfathomable, but it's real and it's part of the experience, and I think it's still part of the experience. So just let me do a quick summary and I'll go back there. The narrator of this novel is Irene Redfield, and she is telling the story of her and her childhood friend Claudia. Nope, her childhood friend Claire. Sorry, Claudia was in the last one. Claire and Irene are both biracial, but Claire has chosen to pass as white. And, you know, there's reasons why that happens, so you have to read the book to know. But because she's chosen to pass as white, she ends up married to a very affluent white man who is also racist. And because of that, the relationship or the friendship between Irene and Claire is actually very dangerous for them both. Being found to be passing, I think, was technically like not a criminal offense, but it would definitely have stripped you of anything that you had achieved, for sure. And it also was very conflicting, identifying who you were, what you are. You know, are you Black? Are you white? I can't even imagine. And neither one wants to really accept you. Neither side wants to accept you, because they're always going to be suspicious because you're half the other. Claire really struggles with this through, you know, and Irene's watching Claire struggle, because Irene's kind of accepted that she's Black. She can pass, she can go into better stores, she can be treated better, but Claire has fully assimilated into white culture. But now that she, you know, reconnects with Irene, she wants to be a part of the Black culture. She wants to be a part of that community, and she can't have both. This novel, I think, is important even for today, because there is definitely, while this is obviously another story of like colorism in that way, this is something I think that is still very, like, it's happening today. It's still happening today, and what I'm trying to say is that we still praise lighter skin over darker skin. White women want a tan to be like light skin. There is like this middle ground that is acceptable. It's just, there's so many, it's just, racism sucks. It sucks so bad, and it's just like, these books remind us why it's so important to do the work of anti-racism so that future generations don't have to deal with this shit. The last book in this little section is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou, which, if you don't know who Maya Angelou is, just unsubscribe. But she is America's poet. This is like her most popular work. It's her autobiography of her growing up. Like, I think she was like from the age of like 5 or 7 until she's like a late teen, I think into high school, like senior year. And the story of she's growing up in the South, and it's obviously racist, and how her white neighbors treat her, and even kind of like educators that come to the school to remind her that she's never going to make it because she's Black. Like, she only has an acceptable level that she can rise to, and she's never going to be able to rise past that because of the color of her skin. I think what's really beautiful about this story is also the story of how she ends up going mute by choice, kind of. And I don't really want to ruin it, because I think it's so important to understanding how much this woman struggled and how much she fought back. Like, she went mute, and meanwhile years later, she gives us so many words that are so important to our culture. It's just kind of this crazy irony in the way that, because her voice is taken away from her because she feels like she betrayed someone in her community, she has to struggle with that to fight for her right to own her words in that way. I think this book, because it's an autobiography, so it's non-fiction and it's not fictionalized versions like the other ones, is extremely important and should be read in classrooms. I do know that people were taught it, but at the same time, I was in the highest of the English courses never ever ever taught it. It's just bonkers. I do have 2 bonus books that I'd like to include in here that couldn't have, I think, been added into the curriculum, but I think should be added into the curriculum. And the first one is The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. The Hate U Give is the story of Star Carter, who is a black girl who goes to a mostly white private school while living in a mostly black, poor, kind of gang-ridden neighborhood. And so she's kind of straddling these 2 worlds. And one night she goes to a party with some of her childhood friends, and she's like in the black community, kind of like reminding herself like of, you know, her blackness in that way. And she runs into another childhood friend who's like, hey, like, I'll give you a ride home. And they're driving home when a police officer pulls them over and shoots her friend in front of her. So Star's the only witness, and it's very complicated in, you know, it definitely ties into the Black Lives Matter movement, but I think what's really important and why it should be taught in schools is that this is exactly what happens. This is the point of view. I think this should be included just because of what we're going through, because of, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement being such a huge component in the world, not just in America. I think there's just so much white blaming of like why black people are in the neighborhoods that they're in and why they don't make it out and it's their own fault and blah, blah, blah. And like this book is kind of like, oh really, that's your argument? Here's my counter argument and like why you don't understand. So this is why I think it should be taught in every school ever, especially in high school, so to kind of give maybe white kids, or even black kids a foundation to have something to talk about in common with their white classmates. This last book I kind of tussled with including on the list because it's actually not written by a black author. It's not written by a black woman. It's written by a white woman. I'm including it because it tells the story of Henrietta Lacks. So this book is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. And the reason I'm kind of including it on this list is because a large piece of this book includes direct interviews from Henrietta Lacks' children and diary entries from Henrietta. So it's kind of like, I think it's the closest, you know, arguably closest that you can get to Henrietta Lacks. Her own words and her own thoughts and the people around her. So yes, it's written by a white woman, but I also think, I just feel like Henrietta's story should be taught because Henrietta Lacks is responsible for the immortal cell line, which means every like major medical revelation since the 1950s is because of Henrietta Lacks and her cells. Henrietta Lacks was suffering from cervical cancer, I believe. I'm gonna have to be fact checked, but she did have cancer. She went to Johns Hopkins, which has a long history of screwing over black people. That's the best way to put it. They took her cells from her without really telling her. She had inoperable, and I think basically she was just so late in the stage that there was no way of saving her at that time period, but they took her cells from her, and from them they were able to kind of replicate them and be able to study cells and pass those on. It's hard if you're not in research to really understand. I do work in research, so I was able to kind of have some kind of basis of understanding what they were talking about in the book, and also freaked me out because it made me realize like Henrietta Lacks is technically on my floor. Her cells are on my floor, which kind of awesome. But because of Henrietta Lacks and her cells, we have been able to counter and create so many medical advances from those cells. It's like really hard to kind of like, the list goes on and on and on, but because they were able to use those cells to study that, and they didn't just die, you know, away from their host. We are where we are because of Henrietta Lacks' cells, essentially. That's just it. There's no way around it. And this book is very in-depth on the scientific portion, but it's important to kind of push past it, and because the reason that it's so important is because while wild medical advances are being made, Henrietta Lacks' family has no idea. There was no patient consent. There was no like information or informing the family to know that her cells were doing this, or that they had taken her cells and were doing things with her cells. Not only that, they named the cells HeLa, like H-E-L-A, like Henrietta Lacks, basically identifying her, which is such a no-no. So also because of Henrietta Lacks, we have patient consent. So when you go to the doctor and you sign a consent form, you can thank the mess that is Henrietta Lacks for that. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that all these advances were being made while her family was suffering in poverty and being denied the benefits of their mothers, grandmothers, family members' cell lines. It's bananas. So that's why I think this story is really important, because I think it continues to stress that Black women just kind of literally give themselves to us, and we're just like, thanks, and push it aside and we don't even say thanks. We're just like, okay, we expected it of you. It's just bonkers. I want to use swear words to express how crazy this story was and how angry it made me feel, because Henrietta's family just received nothing from it, while these scientists like went on to like amazing major things and money, and like so much money, and her family got squat. Okay, so now I'm all heated thinking about Henrietta Lacks all over again. I should have done that at the beginning, because that's the book that made me realize how much we take from Black women. So I also didn't mean to make this whole thing just Black women. I'm kind of just realizing I did, but I don't know, maybe because I feel like that's the people I've let down. That's the group I've let down the most. So yeah, I'm gonna rename this to Books by Black Women I Should Have Been Taught in School but Wasn't. Anyway, I am also trying to cultivate a new list of books by current Black authors, like people who are still living, people who can still benefit, I think, from my purchasing. I'm researching Black-owned bookstores that I can purchase through. I will include that in another video and eventually put it in the link below when I get it. I haven't really fully made the list of books that I want to read. I think it's really important to buy books anyway when you can, just because you're kind of voting with your money in that way, and you're telling the publisher, like, take a bet on this person because look how many books they sold. So I'm looking for new authors in that way. Like, I love the oldies, don't get me wrong, they're classics for a reason. So I will include that at some point. Still working on it, and I didn't really want to kind of like just like half put it together for this video. Okay, so I hope that you're doing something for Black History Month to become more anti-racist. I hope that you are finding new Black influencers to follow. I hope that you are accepting, if you're white, that we are racist. And it doesn't mean that you're a crap person, it just means that you have racist ideas in your head and you need to do the work to get them out. And if that's really confusing, DM me, we can talk about it. I'm open to that. So I will see you guys in the next one, and happy Black History Month. Yeah.